Yeah, you're probably too old for cybersecurity. Or maybe not. I guess you'll have to join me for this video to find out how you can tell. But first, welcome back. My name is John Good, and here on this channel, we talk all about cybersecurity. If you enjoy the content, make sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments section below. Also, make sure to check out the description for more training and resources. Alright, let's do this. One question that comes up a lot is regarding age and potentially being too old to get into cybersecurity. It's not completely surprising that this question comes up because, for one, there's a ton of people that are interested in cybersecurity because it's a hot career field and it pays well. Second, there's a rising trend of people who want to work in remote style jobs where there's more flexibility. Both of these are definitely relevant reasons, but why is there so much emphasis on age? Well, there's no question that there's a lot of young people that gravitate towards tech jobs because they grew up using computers, and we see a lot of people like Mark Zuckerberg who are coming out of Silicon Valley. But is it just a young person's career field? The first thing that we should bring up is that if you're in your 30s, 40s, 50s, or even 60s, you've had at least one other career, if not more. What's that career provided for you? It's possible that you've had experience managing people, projects, or creating documentation. So that's a good start and things that we do in cybersecurity all the time. Second, you might have not learned a lot about technology in your previous jobs, but you've been learning things in life for a while now, and hopefully you understand how to learn effectively and quickly. So why does that matter? Well, if you're trying to switch into cybersecurity, obviously you're going to have to get spun up on things quickly, but we also never stop learning things, and we have to learn things all the time that are brand new. Third, at this point in life, you're probably pretty decent at building relationships, and that is huge in cybersecurity. It's not uncommon for younger workers to be more introverted and they want to stick to the command line, but we have a lot of reasons why we need to build relationships throughout the organization to be successful. These sound great, so what are the downsides though? Well, for one, depending on your age, you might not have a lot of years left that you want to work. If you're 55 and you want to retire at 60, your window is very small. Obviously, the shorter that window is, the less time you have to get spun up on things, and it might not make a lot of sense if you only have a few years. Technical jobs are going to require you to make up more ground than non-technical jobs. It's just the way it is because there's more pieces to learn. But the good news is that there's both of these types of jobs in cybersecurity. Next, do you feel at least somewhat comfortable with technology, even if it's just a smartphone or using a computer? I'm not saying that to be negative, but I've also heard people say that they aren't comfortable with a computer, but they want to work in cybersecurity. That's obviously going to be a challenge. It's not that you can't become comfortable as you learn these things, but are you going to be okay with that frustration of learning? Third, do you have the time to commit to learning? Naturally, the older that you are, the more responsibilities you're going to have, like raising a family, and cybersecurity isn't a career field where you can check out every time you leave from work and be successful. There's always something else to learn and new certifications to pursue, which means you have to commit additional learning time. Of course, this list didn't hit every possibility, but these are major considerations when it comes to determining if you're too old. I believe that if you have enough time, energy, and dedication to getting into cybersecurity, it's totally possible. So how much time is enough? It's going to vary based on a lot of factors, but what I can tell you is that you can totally break into the cybersecurity industry with as little as 1 to 2 years of studying and no experience. It's totally possible, and I've seen it. Even if it takes a little bit longer than that, I believe that you can get there.
All right, now I went to Google and I actually searched for any kind of articles that are related to age and working in cybersecurity or being in the cyber workforce. And this is one of the articles that I came up with regarding the demographic and kind of figuring out where people fall as far as age goes. So if we scroll down here, one of the most important things that you're going to see in this article is that this research right here, this is the important part. So 52% of people in cybersecurity are between the ages of 35 and 54. Now, that might seem a little contradictory of what you've heard because you've probably heard of people that are young and just kind of starting out their careers in cybersecurity, 18, 19, 20, mid 20s, something like that. But then if you look at this, only 30% of people are in that 19 to 34 age group. So that's a pretty significant difference. That means that this is not typically somebody's first career field. And, some of these people in this 35 to 54 age demographic, they might have never worked in a tech job before or the IT field. And I think that's a really important point that you have to keep in mind when you're thinking about age And are you too old to be in this career field? Now, you will also see here this next paragraph. And again, I will actually leave this link in the description so you can check this article out on your own. But they even recognize they do need to attract younger people into the career field because there is a heavy emphasis and it's kind of overloaded with an older demographic. And kind of as we develop and cybersecurity becomes more of the norm and we kind of figure out how to get more people into this career field when they are first starting out, these numbers will kind of start to even out and balance themselves. But currently, as we sit right now, it is heavily weighted towards the older age range. And I'm not going to take too much away from this article, but I think just in general, that's a really interesting thing to understand. And when we look at cybersecurity in general, the whole idea of cybersecurity, typically you have quite a bit more responsibility than you will in, say, an entry level IT position like help desk. And that's not to say that help desk kind of jobs don't have responsibilities, because they certainly do, with accounts and some of the permissions that they have access to. But with cybersecurity, typically you have oversight of a lot of different aspects within the network. It's not just Active Directory users or the settings within Office 365 or something like that. You might have access to the firewalls. You might have access to data loss prevention systems where you're actually monitoring data leaving or coming into the network. And you might have very high privilege levels compared to everybody else within the organization. And you definitely have oversight and insight into the things that are happening, which obviously, if you are a bad person or you're an immature person where you aren't ready for that responsibility, you could cause a lot of damage to that organization just by divulging some of that information or not handling it appropriately. So keep that in mind. And especially with leadership in cybersecurity, that's going to be another thing that's very true, where there has to be very responsible people in those kind of positions because they do have extremely high amounts of responsibility. And the other thing that I'll point out too with this is that some people, and why sometimes this age demographic exists, is because a lot of people do come up through IT and other kinds of areas. And so they've kind of gotten put into this position in cybersecurity. But again, you don't have to come directly from an IT career field, and that's not necessarily covering that entire age demographic, but that certainly is a factor as far as why that is. But again, based on age, you don't have to think that you're too old because you're 30s or your 40s or your 50s. I've seen people in their 50s and 60s coming into cybersecurity. Granted, the type of position that you're going to do is going to vary, but that's an important concept. Now, if we go over to this IT certification roadmap from CompTIA, and I'll also put this into the description so you can actually look at this, the main thing that I want to really hit on this roadmap is that typically with cybersecurity, if I were to look at this specific roadmap, and I'm not advocating for this roadmap either way, but it's important to notice that in a cybersecurity role, typically, if I was looking at this, you would fall probably somewhere in between this intermediate and advanced level where you're actually ready to be in that kind of role. The problem is, currently, at least, in this beginner novice area, that's where you're completely starting out from fresh. You don't have a lot of knowledge around cybersecurity or how IT or technology works in the enterprise. So you're not quite ready for that type of role. When you get in intermediate, you could start to be getting there, but you start seeing things like Linux Plus, Network Plus, Security Plus. We also see things like CCNA and some of these a little bit harder certifications to get. And then really you're starting to be ready for that kind of role. And then obviously when we get into advanced, you're seeing things like CYSA Plus and some of the GIAC certifications, CCNP, the CISM, the CISA, and some of these other even more difficult certifications to get, because that would be really more of a technical kind of role where you're starting out, because you do need more of those skills. Or I would say you're probably a little bit closer to the intermediate level than the advanced level if you're trying to get into something like a GRC or governance, risk, and compliance role, because that technical barrier or that that level that you have to pass, that baseline of knowledge that you need, isn't quite as high in those kinds of roles. They rely on other kinds of skills like soft skills and project management and things like that because they're doing a little bit different kind of responsibility than dealing with the deep technical details that you might deal with in a security operations center. So it's kind of just the difference. And of course, you don't have to be on the expert level just to get into cybersecurity. But again, I'm saying you're going to be probably somewhere in this intermediate to advanced level of knowledge. And really, I would classify that kind of as that level of knowledge within IT or within technology. That's not saying you have to have an intermediate to advanced level knowledge of cybersecurity to start in a cybersecurity role. So, really, you don't need that much time in order to get ready. Typically, I tell people that every certification you study generally is going to fall somewhere between 2 to 4 months worth of prep time. That's been my experience with all the certifications that I've got and with everybody that I've talked to, all my students, all the people that I mentor and coach. That's a pretty standard amount of time, about 2 to 4 months per certification exam. Sometimes you'll go faster, sometimes you'll, take longer, and it really depends on the certification and how complex it is. If we were looking at this chart, typically on this left side, like the beginner novice, that might only take you a month to get a certification. But 2 to 4 months is pretty reasonable, especially once you start getting into things like CCNA or maybe even like the Security Plus, and definitely these advanced level certifications. Those are going to take you a few months to get. And obviously, the expert is a little bit more difficult, and that's going to take a little bit more time too, maybe even more experience to get there. But if we're looking at that, let's say you need about 4 certifications here. Well, we're talking maybe a year, maybe at most 2 years to really get those skills. And if you really focus, you can do it faster, but it just depends. And that's the big thing that I want to really point out with this roadmap is you can do it in a relatively short time period if you focus and stay disciplined and learn the key things that you really need to learn. So if you're, let's say 50, 55, and it takes you 2 years, obviously those later years are really important as far as your life and your work experience and your work life. But that's not that much to really get into one of those kind of roles. And typically with the more age you have, so the older that you are, you're going to be looking at some different jobs most likely. You're probably not going to generally be looking at the very technical roles that might take 5-10 years to really become an expert in. You might be looking at something more managerial or maybe more project management based, maybe a GRC, a governance, risk, and compliance kind of role. So it really just depends on where you're at in your career and kind of what you're looking for. But again, it won't take that much time to really kind of meet that minimum barrier. Again, that's about the intermediate to advanced level, somewhere in here.
Question of the day. What's the main reason that you want to get into cybersecurity? Let me know down in the comment section below. In this video, we talked about the myth of being too old for cybersecurity and the things that you should consider when you're trying to switch into a cybersecurity career. As always, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Check out the description for more training and resources, and I'll see you next time.